Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here for VideoCopilot.net, and welcome back to another very exciting tutorial. Today, we're going to be taking a look at building this digital rooftop set based on our recent Video Copilot show that looks something like this. Amazing. Now, be sure to check out the rest of that show. Lots of cool behind-the-scenes action on how we put together the entire sequence. Right now, we're going to build this virtual rooftop set inside of After Effects using Element 3D and the most amazing model pack ever made. I don't know how we do it. Now, even if you don't need a rooftop scene, we're actually going to be covering a bunch of tips and techniques involved in building virtual sets, using digital props. We're going to be setting up a global illumination style lighting with shadows, ambient occlusion, and we're going to even make the ground kind of look like it's wet. So lots of cool tips and tricks. We've got a lot to do. So unlike the guys outside that are supposed to be working on my roof, let's go ahead and get started. All right, we'll come over here and create a new composition. We'll call this roof scene. Make it 1080p. This looks good. We'll hit OK. Then let's create a new solid. We'll call this E3D roof and hit OK. Then we'll come over here to the effects presets. We'll type in element, drag that out onto our solid. Now, if you don't know, Element 3D is a plugin for After Effects that we make that adds a lot of cool 3D capabilities. We use it a lot for motion graphics and things like that, but there's a lot of really cool things you could do in the visual effects space, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. All right, let's click on the scene setup, and let's take a look at this rooftop toolkit. So I've got it installed. You can download it from the website VideoCopilot.net, and once you install it, you will see the rooftop toolkit, which looks like this. So we can just click on an object here, and there it is. An amazing looking vent of some sort. Now I'm going to change the environment map, so we'll come over here to the presets, environment, and we'll go to the basic 2K, and just use this outdoor looking scene, which is just nice because it kind of has a building in it, and rooftops makes sense. Okay, so you could hit N and kind of see the environment that we're reflecting. And I'm also going to turn off draft textures. Perfect. Let's take a look at a couple of these models. So we've got this vent here. Looks really nice. 2K textures. Move that out of the way. We'll load, let's see here. We've got the barrel. I'm also going to turn the light down, actually. So what I like to do is only work in a PBR, a physically based environment. So what I'll do actually is just turn up the brightness and the gamma just a little bit. So on this barrel, you can see that it's a little bit metallic. So one cool thing that you can do is if you come over here to the object, you can click on the material and we can even change the color. So we could just tint it a little bit. And the cool thing about the physically based shader is that the metal doesn't change. So the metal still looks kind of like worn metal, but we're only changing the color of the paint. So this is a really cool way to add variation. And if you really want to get into it, you can click on the glossiness map and actually play around with the brightness and the contrast. So if you brighten it up, it'll actually make the barrel more shiny and more glossy, basically. So You can play around with the levels here. And, just create some really cool results. And of course, once you start compositing your scene, you're going to want to add variation that way. So, for example, we could hold Alt, drag this barrel, maybe rotate it. And here's the tools for the rotate, scale, and move. And maybe here we could change the color. Now, if I change the color of the barrel, it'll change both of them. But if I right-click and choose duplicate and replace, it makes a copy. And we could say just rename this to, say, green. And we could change the color to green. And, and maybe this barrel went through some stuff. So we could go to the glossiness channel and make it a little bit rougher. So just cool ways to add variation to these models. Also, cleaning house, right-click, remove unused. Good idea. Let's take a look. So we've got some air ducts. Look at this thing. Very cool, very rustic. Okay. We've got some pipes. These are really cool. So another cool thing that we tried to do was make the models really versatile. So, for example, you can go here, turn off the support, hit D, or just turn the switch off here, and just have the pipes by themselves. And also, if you go to the mesh view, which is this button right here, you can actually see all of the pieces. So what you can do is if you control click on a mesh, you can hit D or turn off the switch here and disable it. So you can actually go through and create variations. You can even say click a few of these pieces here, disable them. You can also disable multiple. So if you were to say hold Control and Shift, get rid of multiple. Now, if I want to solo these, I can actually hold down Alt and see I have all of them selected here. I can hold Alt down and click on one, and it will solo all the ones that are selected. So just think about what you could do in terms of building blocks as you break these components up and turn them into your own sort of creation. Now, we've also got a beacon light, which is pretty cool. And there is a barrel set, so we've already put a few barrels. That green barrel, man, it just seen some stuff, man. And this is a really cool element. You can also turn on the ambient occlusion inside of the UI just to kind of give it a little bit of shading. So check this out. So that looks really cool. I'm just holding down Shift and dragging the background. Looks like we've got an old looking antenna with some lights on it. We've got a door. And one cool thing about this is if you do go to the mesh view, we can see the door here. Now I see that the door is rotating around the center and I want it to rotate from the side here. So what I can do is go to the move tool and then click on this lock anchor. And then I can move the anchor point over. Can say go to a front view, or so maybe a back view. And I can move the anchor over just like that, then uncheck that, go back to the perspective view, and now if I take the rotation tool, the door opens up nicely. And I can show you some cool ways to animate that as well. So anyway, this is just a brief overview of the rooftop pack, and of course this great air conditioning unit that will keep you nice and frosty. So let's build our rooftop. What we're going to do is create a plane. So we'll come over here, create a plane, and let's make this 5 by 5. Now, we're going to be using this really cool rooftop texture that has some really nice detail in it. So what I'll do is I'll switch back to material view, click on the new material, and this is just a basic material that's completely reset. And what I'll do is I'll take my textures and drag them right into the slot. So we'll drag the roof texture into the diffuse, and we'll take the roof texture normal and put that into the normal slot. Now, you can see it's got a bunch of kind of bumpiness to it, so we'll turn the normal down to maybe 5. And we just want it to be really, really subtle. And I'm also going to add some detail because I've actually created this as a tiled texture. So what I'm going to do is click on the object, come over here to the UV mapping, and it's already set to UV, so we'll set the repeat up to 2. So as I increase it, you see that it just adds more tiling. So let's set that to, say, 2.5 and 2.5. That's nice. And now it's pretty glossy, right? This is not looking right. So one thing I could do is I could turn the glossiness down. And as I do that, it becomes a little bit more matte or a little bit more diffused. But I don't want it to just be all diffused. I want it to have some detail. So what I can do is I can actually use the diffused texture and put it into the glossiness map slot. So if I hold down Alt, drag that onto the glossiness map, and then go inside of it and then turn the brightness up a bit, check this out. You see right here, we're really transforming the way that this surface looks. So we can see here now that we have areas that are really diffused, and then we have areas that are a little bit more glossy, almost like it's a wet surface. So we can basically play around with the bias by playing around with the level control. And you have things like saturation and contrast that can help really refine it. And you can also even invert the map, which will give you, a different look altogether. But I think something like this is actually really nice. All right, so let's go ahead and start adding some of our digital props. Now, just to clean up, let's go ahead and remove any of the unused materials, and we'll even rename this material. And just to be clear, I'm only pretending to be organized for the sake of this tutorial. Okay, so we'll come over here to some of these roof props. We have this air duct. Let's just bring this out here. And let's set this up as our orientation. So we're looking this direction. And using WER, we can move these things around. We can come over here, scale them up a bit. And let's hold Alt and drag this. We'll rotate this. Scale it up. So I want the camera to sort of be almost like this. Move this closer here like that. And let's add some of these pipes. So we'll put these pipes out here. By the way, I'm holding down Shift for it to lock to an angle. And maybe we'll just turn it that way. Scale it up a bit. And maybe we'll throw a few of these ducks out here. Maybe one here. Maybe we'll put one over here and make it larger. So we're just trying to fill up the scene a bit. We'll take one of these large AC units. Place one here. Another cool thing you could do, you can just maybe stick it through the ground. Like, almost just as a way to add detail. It's almost as if you're just throwing random props around just to make the shot look cool. Who would do that? Now, I'm not joking, but I recently just figured out this feature in Element, is that if you're sort of behind the gizmo, and, you can move it up and you can move it side to side, but you can't quite get to that other gizmo, and you have to move the camera to get to it. Well, check this out. You can actually just put your mouse behind it as if there's an imaginary line in the corner and access that gizmo. Now, we should probably make that a little bit more obvious so that people who make the software can figure it out. All right, so this looks pretty good for now, and of course we can refine this as we set up the shot. So we'll come over here, hit OK, go ahead and save the project, and let's go ahead and create a camera. So hit OK. Now I want to rotate the scene a bit. So I can move the camera, but actually I'm just going to rotate the scene. So let's just rotate this so that it looks similar to how we had it inside of Element. we'll go ahead and move the camera in here a little bit closer. Now, one of the questions I get a lot is how do I set things up to be more realistic inside of Element? So right now I'm going to show you one of the go-to solutions that I use for setting up an outdoor style lighting. So it starts with a parallel light. So we're going to create a new light, set this to parallel with a little bit of orange, a little bit of warmth. Then we'll hit OK, maybe 150, and cast shadows. So we'll hit OK. Now, just to move this light, we're going to move it over here to the right. Let's go to the top view and hold down Control. I'm going to move the light over to the side here. So here's our camera. We're looking this way. Our light is coming from the right. So realistic lighting starts with lights and render settings. So let's come down here to the render settings. And we'll come over here to the shadows, and we're going to enable the shadows. And so right away, we're already getting somewhere with our shadows. Now, what we can do is increase the shadow map resolution. Now, if you have a good graphics card, you can also switch this to ray traced. Now, because the scene is not too complex and these models are really well optimized, ray tracing can actually be pretty fast when you're not doing diffused or soft shadows. So in this case, we're doing a really hard sort of sun-like shadow. So this actually helps make it more realistic and keeps our render times under control. Now the other thing is ambient occlusion. So what we could do is enable ambient occlusion, and we're going to change it from screen space to ray traced. Now this is not going to be as fast to render as screen space ambient occlusion, but it looks a lot better. Now, what I like to do is turn the blur down to about 0.2. You really want to have sharp and crisp ambient occlusion. So we can come down here to the output and look at the ambient occlusion, and you can see what that's doing. And it kind of has a nice, almost like a global illumination look to it, like a skylight. And this is just a nice look to this rooftop scene. So we'll go ahead and switch this back. Let's take a look at a couple of the ray trace settings. So here we have the max distance. And if we turn this down, you can basically see it can create really, really tight ambient occlusion or really, really wide ambient occlusion. So depending on your scene, you maybe want it to be soft and maybe you just want it to be contact shadows. So in this case, we're going to do something kind of in between, maybe 35, that looks pretty good. All right, so we have our shadows and we have our ambient occlusion. How can we get this to look more realistic? So if we come up here to the lighting, even if I disable the comp lights, Element 3D gets a lot of its material lighting from the physical environment. So if I turn the brightness up or the gamma, or even if I rotate the environment, it changes the look of the materials. Now, if I show the environment in the background, you can actually see how it affects the materials. And this is all before I have even turned on any lights. So the clue here is that we want to make sure that our environment is lighting up our scene in a realistic way. So we'll go and turn the comp lights back on, and maybe we'll pull this light down a little bit so we have some longer shadows, and maybe try to make this look like a little bit more overcast. We'll turn up the gamma here and turn up the exposure a little bit. All right, so I think we've got a pretty good start on our rooftop setup. So let's go and put the camera into position, and let's go and start adding our background elements. So we'll come over here to the project. I've got a couple of things already pre-made. We've got some background buildings that we can scale down. We've got some intermediate buildings. Put those right underneath the Element 3D layer and scale them down. And having your backplate actually helps a lot to start figuring out the perspective and the balance of the shot. So, you know, when you have perspective lines like this, you want to try to match those. So, you know, figuring out all of the angles and things like that. So we also probably want to try to match the sort of overall density and brightness of the scene. So Here now we're just playing with those three settings, the exposure, gamma, and then of course rotating the environment to try to match the feel of the scene here. All right, so we've got a great start here, but we don't want everything to be a lifeless digital creation. We want to have a little bit of humanity. And that's where Sam Loya comes in, doing his best Uncanny Valley impression. Amazing. All right, so we've got Sam here. We're going to drop this into our project. Come over here to Key Light. We're going to get rid of that green. Let's see here. Key Light. Drop that on there. Take the color. I'm going to pick the color close to the edge. I'm going to turn up the screen gain. We'll solo this here. And we're going to switch this to the intermediate result so we can look at how this is affecting it a bit. And we'll go to the clip black, bring that down. That'll kind of add some of that detail back in after we turn up the gain here. So it's pretty good. And we'll just add a quick screen blur, maybe 1.5. Now we're probably going to take a look at some more advanced keying tricks, but in this particular shot, it's pretty small. We'll just shrink it and not worry about doing something too complex. Now, in all seriousness, I know I give Sam a hard time about his acting, but I gotta say, in this most recent project, I think the guy with the leaf blower really stole the show. I mean, just look at the concentration. You know, it's no wonder those guys in that leaf blowing union make so much money. All right, so let's just do a quick garbage mat. I hate to do this, but, well, we have to. Cut Sam out here. And that looks good. So we'll unsolo him. Now, let's go and fix some of the green here. We'll come over here to Spill Suppressor, Advanced Spill Suppressor. Drop that over here, and we'll set it to Ultra. Looks really good. And let's do a basic color correction to match some of this blue. So we'll add a curves adjustment. And we'll go and set this to the red channel and just turn this down just a little bit here. So pretty good. Maybe just add a touch of blue. Hide the masks. All right, so we'll go and make Sam a 3D layer. And we'll hit AA, turn off Accept Lights. Probably should be set that way by default. I'm going to make a feature request. Now, we'll go ahead and scale this down just a little bit. Now, the anchor point is right here in the center. What I want to do is move Sam up so his feet are right here. So what we can do is hold down Alt, and you can actually move the layer and keep the position and anchor point in place. So I don't think this worked in older versions of After Effects. So really cool feature. And now I can scale this, and Sam will appear to be intersecting with an air conditioning unit, which is perfect. So what we'll do is we'll move Sam forward right to the ledge there. Scale him up a bit. Or down, I don't know. All right, now Sam is a 3D layer, but let's make our background layers 3D as well. So we'll turn on the 3D layer switch, hit AA, turn Accept Lights to off. And we'll take the Move tool, and let's just push these layers in Z space. So I'm holding down Shift. That's good. And we'll push the background even further away so that there's some digital space. There we go. So now we can just scale the layer up. Take the background and scale it up. And that way there'll be a little bit of a parallax, a little bit of dimension in the far background. All right, so let's go and add our digital camera movement. What I'm going to do is create a null object. We'll make it 3D. And I'm going to parent our camera to it. Then hit P, select the position keyframe, and we're going to move the Z position forward. So just making a simple little push in like that. Now, I like to use a null because this way I can move the camera and I'll still have the basic movement. Now, another cool detail is adding some smoke elements. So I've got some smoke elements from Action Essentials 2. We'll drag these out, make it a 3D layer. You know what's next. Hit AA, accept lights to off, and we'll tint this. And we'll hit S, scale it down a bit. And we'll do that same trick with the pan behind tool. Grab that, hold Alt. And that way the bottom of the smoke, it's a little easier to align to the surface. Now, I'm also going to create a mask around my smoke here just to feather the edges a bit. So hit F, increase that a bit. And we'll just, put some smoke here. Scale it down a little bit. Hit Control D. Maybe we'll put some smoke over here. That air conditioning seems a bit smoky. Offset the time a bit. No one will ever know. And we'll say duplicate it again. And let's put this over the ledge. So we'll put this behind the element layer and move it down just a bit as if, I don't know, somebody's windows opened up and they're making something smoky. Nice. Maybe some more foreground smoke. I think it's always good to mix in some live action elements, even if it's really, really faded, like even if it's just barely noticeable. One thing I was going to talk about was giving the surface a little bit more of a wet, sort of watered down look. So what we could do is jump inside here and let me show you how you can actually create a reflection plane. So if we select our plane model and go to the glossiness and maybe just turn the glossiness up just a little bit. And here we can see it somewhat reflecting the environment, but we're not really reflecting the objects yet. So for example, right here, we can see it's not really reflecting. So what I'll do is just right click on the plane and choose Reflect Mode, Mirror Surface. And so what that does, as you can see there, is it creates a bit of a mirrored reflection. Now I could turn up the, turn the map down a bit, maybe even turn up the reflection, the actual reflection, just to make it a little bit more apparent. But I think this is cool where you can just kind of create pockets of water, essentially, that are more reflective, but doesn't look like it's completely wet. So I think something like that is pretty cool. All right, so let's hit OK. Let's take a look. So that looks nice. You can see now we're reflecting that a bit. And again, we can tweak the environment and move that around. And of course, we could duplicate Sam and make him reflect a little bit as well. But frankly, I'm just going to probably cut him from the scene altogether. Let's just do that now. In fact, you know who we should add? Let's see here. Let's go to the star pack and let's just add this guy. I'll scale him down a little bit. Let's see here. See, now we're talking. And maybe what we could do is let's reset the position and let's drag it out of the group folder and put it on group 2. So when they're on separate groups, it just makes it a little easier to animate. So huge BB-8 here now is on group 2, right? So what we can do is scale him down here, and he's already rigged up. So we could create a null object, okay? What is this tutorial about? I don't even know anymore. But see, I can move him around a bit. That's cool. And if I go to the auxiliary channel, you can actually play around with the rotation. And I think on just the different there's his head there. So if you play with the different auxiliary channels, 1, 2, and 3, you can actually animate his rig. Now, I don't know how Disney would feel about BB-8, you know, standing over the ledge of a building. Disney will probably send me a letter about, like, robot suicide and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, now speaking of the auxiliary channel, I got a little off track here. If we go back to the air conditioning here, and we select that, the AC unit, we could click on the mesh view. And I think if we hold Control and click, we can actually select the fan, right? And then I can rotate. See this? And what we can do is take that sub-object. Now, in order to animate it in After Effects, what we could do is click on the auxiliary animation, set it to channel 1. Now remember, we're on group 1, auxiliary channel 1. So then we hit OK. We'll close group 2, open group 1, go to the auxiliary channel for 1, and now, get ready. I can rotate this fan. So that's great. So you can just animate it here. You got the fan. Works the same for other things, maybe helicopters or cars or other things that you need to animate simple things moving and you just want to be able to control all of the keyframes. It works pretty well. And by the way, you can download the Star Pack over at Video Copilot, so some really cool models in there. In fact, we've got a vaporator in here. I mean, that looks just like a rooftop element to me. Just stick that in there. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we'll just make it a little darker. I honestly don't think anyone would know. All right, so this is definitely one cool way to use digital props in your films. And, you know, as you're thinking about different things that you may want to use, keep this in mind. Let's imagine you had a real rooftop scene like this that you filmed, and maybe you wanted to add some additional objects. So what you could do is set up the scene the same way that we just set it up. And instead of using our ground that we created, what you can do is click on the material and go down to the advanced settings and turn on matte shadow. And what that does is it actually makes the ground transparent. So now you can basically place digital props into your scene. Now, in this particular scene, there's not really any hard shadows. It's very ambient lit. So I turned off the shadow lighting. But if you do need shadows, just check out the matte shadow control and you can play around with the darkness of the shadow. So in this case, we're just going to disable comp lights, and that looks pretty good. So you can imagine here now I've added in some nice digital props, sometimes just having some cool things in the foreground, like some cool crates or some cool objects, just helps fill out the scene a little bit. Now, finally, I'll leave you with this tip, and that is the ability to use digital props to cover up bad acting. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. I'm Andrew Kramer. Be sure to check out Element 3D. A lot of cool things you can do for motion graphics, and definitely some great things you can do in the visual effects department. And in the meantime, I'm going to do some color correction on this. I forgot. All right, once again, thanks so much for watching. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, all that good stuff. We appreciate it, and we will see you next time.